both of Alexander and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander, and such great names as these. But of all...
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to be doing a fairly long one with the Atlas, which has been around for quite some time and has been used as a primary command mech for just about as long. The Atlas comes from the days of the Star League, but has been known fairly well during the Succession Wars as well, because it was the heaviest thing you could really field almost any time. There were those few unicorn mechs floating around. You could see a king crab every once in a while, or a pillager showing up. But really, the Atlas was the king of the battlefield just because of its sheer weight and size. So let's get into it. In the old mythology of the Greeks, Atlas was the titan that was cursed by Zeus to hold the earth on his mighty shoulder. Well, to be quite honest, the Atlas kind of held a lot of the Inner Sphere's military on its shoulder when it was around as well, so it kind of is irrelevant. It's no wonder that Alexander Kerensky wanted this machine to hold up all the ideals of the Star League and of human civilization, at least in his view. So it wasn't the first assault mech that he actually designed. The first thing was actually the King Crab, which was a little bit more advanced. It had a little bit more fancy bits and bobs compared to the Atlas, but it was already a fairly scary machine, and it leads us in the direction of the Atlas as well. And you can tell that the Atlas is a derivative, in a way, of the King Crab, trying to fix some of the issues this other machine had. 100 tons is the theoretical limit on a standard bipedal battle mech, or even most of our standard quads as well. This is basically based on how Mechwarrior works and how the standard chassis of a battle mech works. I'm sure if we spent quite a bit of time and quite a bit of money, we could arrange something different. But every time it really was tried, it didn't turn out too well. For something a little bit bigger nowadays, we've got a few of those tripods walking around. I'm not always a huge fan of those, but I think they kind of work. I'm sure, once again, if you sat down and you had someone look at the entire design specs, at some point we'd be able to get something bigger built. But, you know, that's theoretical at this point as well. The very first battle mech, the Mackie, was already clocked at 100 tons, and it was a common sight during the Star League era and during the days of the American Civil War as well. They weren't all destroyed, they weren't all mothballed, they were working fairly well. The most recent models were capable enough, and well, if they were put on the battlefield, they could still punch holes into enemy formations. The other 100-tonners that you would see in that day and age, other than the King Crab that we just discussed here, was the Pillager, a massive siege breaker, which uses either a pair of AC-20s or a pair of Gauss rifle to do its job, and the rather uncommon quad named the Xanthos, which was more common in the Capellan space and in a few different local areas, let's say. When the Atlas was originally designed by Alexander Kerensky, it was meant to strike fear in the enemies of the Star League with how tough and overbearing it was. It had a pair of battle fists, which the King Crab didn't have, meaning that you could have a 100-tonner mech walk up to you and just punch you in the face, which the Pillager was very good at doing as well if you look at the whole spectrum of the time. It was also massively armored and packed a suit of weapon that could be used to engage at various range, but it was far more effective at brawling range. Once again, a little bit more like this King Crab compatriot. It's quite an effective machine there, and it does strike fear into people. Just knowing that a 100-ton machine is going to show up is enough for light formations to break. Surprisingly, though, the Atlas was built off standard off-the-rack parts for the time, at least most of the non-custom versions, meaning that it easily survived the devastation of the First Succession War and the Ameris coup, so it was the heaviest mech available through most of the Succession War. General Kerensky wanted to take all the Atlases with him during Operation Exodus, but a lot of them remained in the Inner Sphere, and there were factories that were still pumping them out like candies. New Atlases did come out of factories on Alnair, Quantin, and Esperus 2, meaning the Draconis Combine, the Federated Sun somewhat, and the Lyran Commonwealth had the most of them. For the Federated Suns, they controlled Quantum for a little while, which is why I'm saying this, and the fact that they were getting into fights with the Combine all the time, so they could steal quite a few from them. So blah blah blah, you know what's going on later on, the Elm's Memory Core and all that stuff. Well, the Atlas started getting its upgrade kits in 3049s, either from the Korean side of the border or the Steiner side of the border in a way. Each of those had their own kits to fight against the clan, proving that the Atlas was still what was needed for fighting those big targets. The clans actually liked the design as well when they started getting into it with the Inner Sphere, and quite a few were salvaged and retrofitted with clan equipment for garrison duty or for Salama troops to just be used as a battering ram. Later on, well, you've got Civil War variants, you've got Jihad's variants, you've got Republican Age variant, you probably even have recent Il-Clan era variants. The Atlas is one of the most popular mech in the field with commanders and officers, so you will also see dual cockpit variants, command console variants, C3 master refits. Just about everything that can be used on an Atlas has been used at some point. For many modern commander, it's not the best mech out there, but it's the one that they have, and that's the one that their crew knows how to fix. So let's look at the base Atlas first. That gets a top speed of 54 kilometers per hour and 100 tons. That means the Atlas uses a Vlar 300 engine, which is great because you also have other mechs that use Vlar 300 engines, the Orion and the Marauder, which are very, very common in the Star League arsenal, especially the Marauder at the time, which was the command mech of choice for most of the Gunslinger program. The standard chassis of the Atlas makes it very easy to repair, and it has 19 tons of standard plates, meaning that it's actually quite hard to punch through it. You get 20 standard heat sinks in order to keep the assembly cool enough if the pilot is not a complete idiot. So it's a very straightforward, basic kind of machine that can be deployed just about anywhere, repaired just about anywhere, and then brought somewhere else. So the loadout on the original AS-7D from 2755 kind of mimics the Orion's weapon loadout, just maximized for the bigger weight. Your main gun is a 20 class autocannon on your right side, allowing you to take down quite a few things with a single shot. Backing this up is a 20 rack LRM on the opposite torso. Both weapons are fed by 2 tons of reload. Once you get at closer range, you get a pair of arm-mounted medium lasers and a 6 tube of SRMs. You also have a pair of medium lasers pointing backwards in order to protect your risky rear area. But as with most things Mechwarrior-wise, well, you'll have most people flipping them forward because they want extra firepowers on things that they're actually seeing rather than protecting them. That's what you have light mechs and medium mechs for in the end. The side grade to this is the AS-7DDC, which is meant to be a command mech using a command console. So an officer is in charge of the entire company of mech, while another one is piloting the battle mech. To save on weight here, what they do is they take off the rear-facing medium lasers and a ton of LRM reload. Command consoles are not the lightest thing around and need to be mounted in the head. It still works fairly well. I've seen other people finagle their way into a command console on a standard Atlas by taking off some heat sinks, taking off a little bit of plates. There's different command console versions of the Atlas. This one here is just the more standard one that was built for the Star League. Kerensky did also create an Atlas too. I would probably call it more a Royal Atlas, knowing the era in which it came out. The big difference with it is the head module is looking a little bit different from the original Atlas, a different form of skull head, basically. But outside of that, the chassis is more or less the same. The general body shape is the same. The equipment is, well, a little bit different, but still more or less the same. For weapon, the Atlas II, or AS-7DH, is meant to engage at a bit of a longer range using arm-mounted LB-10X and a pair of ER-large lasers. You get fairly decent range on that, and it's going to give you a fairly decent amount of punch as well. The missile racks are set up in a similar way, and you've got 2 medium pulse lasers in order to engage at closer range. All of that is facilitated by ferrofibrous armor rather than standard plates on the design, and the heat sinks are set up as 14 doubles rather than 20 singles, so you get more heat dissipation, but still not quite enough to shoot just about everything all the time, so you do still have to be a little bit careful. It is a very decent kind of mech, but those were taken by Kerensky during the Exodus, so those weren't around during the Succession War. There weren't that many different variants of the Atlas during the Succession Wars, but there were a few that came out over time. You had a lot of custom versions and refit jobs for it, and there were some more standard ones that floated around. The AS-7RS came out in 2892, and it was meant to protect the commander by keeping them out of harm's way. Your main gun is replaced with a standard 10-class autocannon, while you have a large laser on each arm, all sharing that longer range profile. It also kind of mimics your Atlas II, if you've noticed it there. The LRM is downgraded to a 15 class, while the SRM is downgraded to a 4 class, so you've got your firepower just varied a little bit on this one. This is probably one of my favorite variants of the Atlas during that particular era, because it actually protects the pilot a little bit better, and it's still going to be quite scary once it gets into punching range. There's another one that was fairly standard, which was the AS-7A, which came out in 2954, and this one had 30 tubes of SRM in the right torso in order to give you a massive one-time punch once you got close to a target. Opposite as this was a 5-class autocannon and a 10 rack of LRMs to give you some long-range damage options, and you had medium lasers in the arm for even more brawling goodness. This one I haven't seen very often, I'll be quite honest. It does work okay from what I have seen, but it's mainly good at blowing up tanks and blowing up other armored assets. It's not as good when fighting other mechs. I would prefer the RS to this one every day of the week. The first wave of upgraded Atlas came out in 3049 from the Draconis Combine with the AS-7K, with a machine that was meant to fight against the Federated Commonwealth. They had no idea something even worse was going to show up, around the same time. The engine is upgraded to a Vlar 300 XL to save on weight, and you've got case to protect the ammo and the pilot. Some people might say, well, it's not that useful to have case on a mech with an XL engine until you actually have to fix the damn things. You'll notice that it's a lot easier to fix an engine that is only partially gone rather than completely gone. For even more protection, you get an anti-missile system on your shoulder, which is pretty nice. And your main gun is replaced with a Gauss rifle, giving you very good range, and the lasers in the arms are replaced with ER large lasers to get even more range. You have a pair of medium pulse lasers that points backward, which is where they can be fairly useful, but most pilots are still going to flip them forward to get more forward-facing firepower. C3 integration was also starting to show up at the time, and the Atlas K series is where the Draconis Combine started experimenting on that. There was a Slave Atlas, the more basic version here, where you take out a medium pulse laser to put a C3 Slave unit and an extra heat sink in. A pretty decent, simple little thing to do. There was the Master Atlas as well, which removes one of the large laser in order to put the C3 Master in. I probably would have taken off or reduced the LRM rather than one of the large lasers, but I'm not the one making the darn things once again. The AS-7K2 came out in 3082, playing around with a lot of things in order to make some decent changes to the Atlas. The biggest thing here is that you replace the engine from a 300 to a 400 XL, giving you a top speed of 64 kilometers per hour. You keep 10 double heat sinks for heat dissipation because you kind of need to save on weight for that bigger engine. For protection, it does have 17.5 tons of ferrofibrous plates, which is pretty decent, and a Guardian ECM to allow you to cut through enemies' electronics. You still have a Gauss rifle and 2 ER large lasers as your main weapons, and you have a pair of Streak 6-tube SRM in order to finish up enemies once you get in range. It's not a terrible idea, and it is going to work fairly well, and you're going to be able to get into punching and kicking range a little bit easier. I'm just worried that you don't have enough heat sinks to actually manage your heat load. The AS7K3 came out the following year, focusing even more on mobility than the previous one. Your 12 tubes of Streak SRM are downgraded to keep only 4 of them, but you add 3 jump jets, 6 tons worth of jump jets to be exact, in order to go just about wherever you want to go. Again, this is one that I would not recommend most people use. It is very specialized. Your mileage may vary. The final 7K series is the K4, which came out in 39.8. It shares the larger 400XL engine, while it mounts 13 double heat sinks in this case, and 16.5 tons of ferrofibrous plates, so it's not the best protected machine out there. Your main gun, however, is now a rotary AC-5 fed by 3 tons of ammo with ERPPCs now in each arms. You also still get SRM2, but in this case standard ones rather than Streak, in a 2x6 setup with 2 tons of reload. This one I like a lot better than the previous ones. It is going to run freakishly hot unless someone is a little bit smart and replaces those ERPPCs with standard PPCs, which is a thing that I've seen a lot of people do. On the Federated Commonwealth side of the border, the AS7S came out in 3050. This one uses very limited advanced technology, mainly replacing the heat sinks with double heat sinks. You have 15 of them rather than the original 20s, and you use the saved weight to do a crazy thing, stick an extra 2 Streak SRM2s in the back to protect the rear. I don't know any pilots who think that is a good idea. All of them have swapped them to face forward instead. And even there, they would probably have preferred the regular armament to be modified a little bit or improved. This one really didn't sell gangbusters. The actual real upgraded Atlas came out in the FedCom Civil War with the AS7S2. This one uses a light engine in order to save on some weight, and you keep 16 double heat sinks to keep yourself decently cool. Your main gun is now a massive Heavy Gauss rifle, which sits on the side torso, ready to destroy just about whatever it hits. The arm mount does ER large laser for long-range engagements, and the LRM rack is set up with an Artemis guidance system, but it's only a 15 rack rather than a 20 rack. The Garniciem rounds out the defense of the machine, making it fairly reliable in the long run. Unfortunately, Heavy Gauss rifles are not the most common thing around, and they were not easy to build during the FedCom Civil War. In order to keep the production and sales going, an AS7S3 replaces the Heavy Gauss rifle with a standard one. The ER large laser assembly in the arms are replaced with a PPC small laser assembly, kind of like what you'd have on a Marauder, but you keep the fist, and you get a third small laser added to the head for some reason. I mean, at some point, it might be useful once you get into that massive brawling range. The Garniciem on this particular version is also coupled with an anti-missile system, so you get very, very good protection against just about anything that would come your way. Down the line, well, you've got the AS7S4, which combines Lyran know-how with Capellan technology. This one uses stealth armor rather than standard armor, which is pretty good since you have that Guardian ECM on most of those S series. You get a compact gyro as well on this in order to save a little bit more space on the entire design. Your main gun is still a Gauss rifle in the right torso, while each forearm mounts an ERPPC. Once again, I've seen quite a few people switch them over for regular PPC in order to help with the heat curve. At closer range, you are protected by 2 medium X-pulse lasers, which are pretty decent, but once again run you quite hot. Really, this is an odd idea of a mech with stealth armor, but I think it works okay in many situations, and you're going to have a few people surprised by a stealth Atlas just dropping on them. There was an AS8D which came out in 3074 as an eclectic prototype with all sorts of weird technologies, starting with triple strength myomer, which is really nasty on a 100-ton mech. Each arm also mounts a light PPC for decent medium range engagement, while the side torsos mount MML9s, allowing you to fire both LRMs and SRMs, which get pretty decent once you get close by. The center torso has a belly button mounted snub-nose PPC, while you also have a rotary AC-5 on the left side. To round things up, you get a pair of ER small lasers and small lasers in order to control your eat curve in order to keep your Iomer active and be a little bit faster and punch a whole lot harder. 3140 also brought out a bunch of new atlases, starting with the AS-8K from the Draconis Combine. The big thing about this one is that it is clad in 26 tons, so a little bit more than a quarter of its weight in Ballistic-Reinforced Armor, meaning you can take a beating from missiles, autocannon, Gauss weapon, mortars, you name it, and keep going. The ammo is also protected by Case 2 bins, meaning that if they go, well, you might not even feel it. This makes it probably one of the toughest mech around. Your main gun remains a Gauss rifle with an ER large laser in the arm in order to give you very nice sniping capability. And for missiles, you get a Streak 6 tube of SRMs and an MML5, which might look a little bit anemic compared to everything else. The rear is protected by 2 ER medium lasers, but knowing Mechwarriors, we will see a lot of those being pointed forward rather than backwards going forward. A lot of people really like that 8K series, so what happened is that Independence decided, well, maybe we should make a cheaper version that could be sold to mercenaries and other friends of the state. This one uses a standard engine rather than an Excel engine in order to lower the cost and make it quite a bit tougher, while keeping the 26 tons of ballistic reinforced plate. In order to do that, though, you have to take out one of the Streak SRM2 and the rear firing lasers. Not a huge problem, but having seen those in the field a few times, they run really odd on top of things. So maybe a few other tweaks would have been needed in order to make it a little bit more efficient. Defiance really likes to flex that they have an understanding of clan technologies, and they decided to show that off with the AS-8S. The main gun on it is an inner sphere weapon, an improved Heavy Gauss rifle, which is really nasty, but the engine is a Clan XL engine connected to a compact gyro in order to save a little bit of space. For backup, you get a pair of Clan ER large lasers in the arm and a pair of Clan ER medium lasers to protect the rear, sometimes. You have a Clan 5-rack of LRM, which is an afterthought, and an inner sphere 6-tube Streak SRM, because that's one of the things that they don't know how to do. All of the ammo and the Gauss rifle is protected by Case 2, so this thing is actually quite survivable as well. This is probably as far as we can go right now with the knowledge of technology we have, or at least the knowledge of technology Defiance has. The Atlas II got a revamp from the word of Blake as well, so that's one thing we're going to add to the list here. The AS-7DH2 has 17 tons of ferrofibrous armor and 13 double heat sinks to keep it cool, and is fairly common, surprisingly enough. For weapon, it's not super original, with an arm-mounted Gauss rifle with an ER-PPC on the other arm. It kind of mimics some of the smaller mechs that are around at the same time, things like the Caesar as an example. You keep a 20-rack LRM for long-range engagement, while a 6-tube of SRMs help you at closer range. It's fairly well balanced. It's going to be able to do a little bit of everything, but mainly at long range, which is where you would want some of those command mechs to be. The follow-up to this was the AS-7DKH, which uses the massive 400XL engine to give it very good ground speed. The main gun is an arm-mounted rotary AC-5, while 2 clan-graded ER large lasers sit on the other side. For bombardment, you get a clan-graded 20-rack LRM, which is a lot lighter than the standard one, and you get 2 ER medium lasers and a tube of 6 SRMs on the left torso. All the ammo is protected by Case 2. The body is made of 16.5 tons of ferrofibrous plates. This is probably like one of the ultimate iterations of the Atlas. In the Federated Suns, well, they didn't have any massive factories to build Atlases, so Ribbinston Standard Battleworks started working on the AS-7D3 in 3137, which is a machine that a lot of people started nicknaming the Atlas III. Once again, the biggest difference is that head module on it. Now it looks like an evil goalie rather than a skull helmet. It's okay, a lot of people still like it, and it still looks fairly scary. It has 19.5 tons of plate and an armored cockpit to make sure that the pilot is not going to die. And it has a pair of small shields on each arm in order to increase protection even more. You have an Angel ECM on top of all of that in order to prevent enemy electronics from causing any issues. To keep cool, what it has is a 12 double heat sinks, which might not sound like a whole lot, but it has a radical heat sink system in order to improve cooling in short bursts. It is overall a pretty odd setup, but we'll see how it goes. The Atlas III is meant to engage at a range, with its main weapon being a rotary AC-2 with 2 tons of reload, which is not a whole lot on a 100-ton mech, and this is backed by a Clan Streak 20 rack of LRMs, which is far more scary. At closer range, you get 4 medium X-pulse lasers, which give you okay range and pretty decent precision, and a Streak 6 tube of SRM allow you to exploit all the holes you've made in enemies' plates with your various weapons. There is a rarer D2 variant which mounts the AG-30 instead of the Rack-2, but it also needs to take off the shields in order to do that. I do think, though, it is a better idea than the smaller P-shooter. And we're not quite done yet, because there's the whole wave of Clan Atlases that we haven't even touched yet. The clans actually liked the Atlas for various reasons, because it was a decent enough machine. There were enough of them that they were able to capture them and fix them, and they saw it as an honorable machine built by the Kerenskys, so it was meant to be used by the clans. The first wave of upgrades really comes during the invasion, as they grabbed the various Atlases they captured and started swapping some of the equipment with stuff from clan caches. You put an Ultra AC-20 with 3 tons of reload rather than the regular 20 class autocannon. You put a Clan LRM-20 and a Streak 6 tube of SRM, so you get even more fun things there. The lasers normally remained inner sphere grade, so 2 regular medium and 2 backfiring medium lasers, but I have also seen quite a few of them with ER medium lasers being used instead, just because, well, at some point you use the lasers that are available to you rather than the ones that came stock. With all of the saved weight, you added an extra 6 standard heat sinks, and it was perfectly fine for garrison work and Salama work if someone needed to die a glorious death. The Atlas C Mark II was used by the clans in the homeworld before most of them were mothballed, and they came back into service during the invasion and the War of Reaving. The AC-20 on them was swapped with an LB-20X, while the LRM rack is replaced with an ER-PPC for more big punch action. The lasers mounted in the arms are replaced with ER large lasers, and you get 2 medium pulse lasers at closer range. You still have a Streak 6 tube of SRM in order to round things out, and 20 double heat sinks try to keep the whole thing fairly cool. This one is a massive monster. I've actually had the opportunity to fight against one once, and I actually did not appreciate it. The C Mark III is meant as a true support machine, built around an Aero 4 artillery system in its left torso. The rest of the weapons are also meant for long-range fire, starting with a Gauss rifle on the opposite side. Each arm mounts the ER large laser that is fairly common in mech of its category now, and you get 17 double heat sinks to try to keep everything in check. It's a bit of an odd duck, but Gauss rifles and Aero 4 systems mean that it will stay completely out of range, command the other guys around the field, and potentially deal crippling damage fairly easily. And were there some dumb periphery refits of the Atlas over the years? Well, there were quite a few, but the most common one is the AS-7P, which actually comes from the AS-7B. This one really mounts a massive hatchet on the right or left, it doesn't really matter, in one of its, and in order to give it a nice, big, choppy action. Smartly enough, the medium laser associated with where the hatchet is moved to the other arm, so you are able to swing the hatchet and shoot with the lasers at the same time. To make room for this, though, the SRM launcher is stripped off and the LRM rack is downgraded to a 15 rack. Normally, I've seen situations where everything is turned into SRMs, but, you know, it's just how the periphery goes. The rest of the weapons remain pretty much the same, but nowadays there are kits with triple strength myomers, with the rear-facing medium lasers generally pointing forward. There's different ones with double heat sinks. I mean, it's never been a standard design, but the AS-7P, in its basic form, is going to be a scary machine for a lot of people. I could really keep going talking about the dozens upon dozens of custom variants of the Atlas. We could talk about the Chevalier's personal Atlas 2 that he used during the SLDF war, etc., etc. We even have our own custom Atlas 2 that showed up during the Irano Civil War. It was a little bit of an odd one. It never really showed up anywhere else, so I'm not sure if it was a one-time custom. But I've had a few different people show up asking me to actually rebuild it for their own need. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think the Atlas is the best big assault mech out there, but it's pretty much better than most of the new designs just because it's actually recognizable, it's easy to fix, and people kind of know what they need to do with it. Seeing as it was pretty much the only 100-tonner available during the Succession War, it has a place in history that a lot of people will remember. If you see old videos, if you read books, comic books, and whatever, you will likely see the Atlas as the big monster that the heroes have to defeat. It is what makes it quite fun, at least on a cultural level. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you very much for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.